Welcome back from the weekend. We are finally here for a fresh new week. It's Monday, the 16th of May, 2022. A very good morning to you, our dear family, those that have made it a habit, those that have decided to always be with us every single morning. And hey, if you haven't joined the club, it's never too late for you. My name is Philomena Mastiko, and I am joined by Mollen, Kenyena, and Kirabo this morning to take you through the course of the week. Well, we can only do that by giving you what you need, which is information, and also giving you some inspiration, and also, just giving you some entertainment to zhuzh it up a little bit, because that's what we do. The weekend was really a long one. It was a crazy one. A lot did happen, some good things, others bad things, others really we cannot really categorize them. The gray area, I would really love to call that. But also, speaking of good things, yesterday was International Day of Families. Now, you know what that means for a family man, for a family woman, for the children, even those who aspire to have families. Clearly, this is something that you cannot miss out on. And celebrations did happen. I don't know how you spent yours as a family, but hey, I will tell you that mine was lovely. I cannot complain. Maybe also just to find out how Robert and Mollen did spend their International Family Day, I would really want to know. Maybe to start off with you, Mollen, good morning.
Yes, a very good morning to you, Philomena, and of course I want to say good morning to your family. Good morning, Uganda. Thank you very much for waking up with us. It's Monday. Seems like it's going to be a long week when you're looking at Monday as a Monday. But guess what? We make sure that at least we lighten it up so that, it will end at the end of the day, and then we can move on. Well, my weekend was mostly full of work and yeah, celebrating family. I feel like that is something that we do on a daily.
Yes.
However, there are people who have claimed being head of family. Those are the fathers and the men. And in this era,
okay.
they have claimed it. I don't know. Maybe it is from biblical times. I don't know. I don't want to go back in history. But these days, we also know that women have had to head families. We have families that are headed by women, and we also want to celebrate them. Thank you very much for making sure that you are the pillar in your family, and that is so important as you move forward with family issues.
All right. Now, speaking of family men, maybe to hear from the family man on this very specific set. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning, Philo. Good morning, Mollen, and of course our precious viewers. Thank you so much for starting your week with us here on Good Morning, Uganda. I want to begin with a correction. When Mollen says families that are headed by women, that is an abnormality. Under normal circumstances, families are supposed to be headed by the man. Biblically, traditionally, wherever it is, even legally, you'd find that the man is the head of the home. So where I have abnormalities, I don't think it's anyone's desire, but circumstances. Also in this dot-com era, we are seeing many women coming up as single mothers and heading families. But that is not what should be.
But
that's what circumstances
that's
have
what
made
is
us.
happening, Robert.
Yeah, but you see,
we are dealing with what is happening right now versus what should be.
When
should be happening.
When society loses grip of its culture and tradition, and then the moral fabric is destroyed,
so can
the abnormalities turn to be normals.
So Robert, can we say that for the men who have decided, some men though, because we cannot generalize all of them, but can we say that some of the men who have decided to ignore their responsibilities as the fathers and heads of families, have they also lost their grip?
They have. It is a shame to us, the male flock. And most of these days when I see many young men choosing to spend more time in gym, making bodies looking good, so that there's someone's daughter somewhere who has worked. Young man, you will suffer in that marriage.
Young king.
Listen to the elder. Listen to the elder.
No woman is going to forsake a man who has money. For a man who has 6 packs, work hard. You will suffer in that marriage. This flock, this gender, once it is the head, there are problems. But back to the family day. Well, yesterday I had time with my family, and today is a very special day for me in my life. It was on this day, 4 years back, that I became a father for the first time.
Oh.
So whenever it is this day, well, it is great. My son today has made 4 years. That is Gavi David Sentongo. He has made 4 years. But me, I've made 4 years as a father.
Oh, wow.
So I thank God. I'm grateful to God for that. And of course, now when we talk about family men, I feel great.
Yes.
I feel that, yes, I'm a man, I'm a parent, and I can discuss these things based on experience.
You can sit on the table, fathers and men. We totally understand that. Well, speaking of families, yesterday, over the weekend rather, the Deputy Speaker of Parliament, that is Honorable Tashobia, said that, listen, and he was telling the men, do not block your wives from getting involved in leadership roles, you know, from taking on all these positions, because you're really lessening their chances of contributing so much to the development of Uganda. And he did say, encourage them, okay? And he actually went ahead to debunk, you know, the societal saying of, you know, when women take on these leadership positions, they lose their grip. As the women in these families, they become very disrespectful. I mean, if the big man has said, probably we need to, you know, follow lead and support these women. They do have the capacity to actually bring out the best in themselves. And they can only do that if they have the support of their families and, most importantly, of their husbands. Because, I mean, we've seen in several instances where a number of men will probably ask the woman, you know what, leave these things, just concentrate on the family. Unless it's a decision that has been taken by the woman. But if it's not that, support her, you know, encourage her to go on. I don't know what you think about that, Mollen.
Well, I think there is one thing that I've noticed with Honorable Deputy Speaker Tayewa. He has been consistent with giving out good ideas. And this particular one, I'm like, yes, that is what we needed to hear coming from a man's angle. Because guess what? I know a lot of men that have actually, you know, stopped their women from even joining politics.
Yes.
And like I say, that is not contributing to the country. But also, I need us to remember that the reality of the matter is men are threatened by a powerful woman in this era. The moment you bring out your cause to be in politics or even in any other powerful position, be it a CEO, or a man will always be threatened by how much power you will have or how much contribution you have towards the family. And like I said earlier, men have claimed this throne of, I am the head of the family, so maybe the woman should even earn less money than I am.
Yes.
So the moment you be in a position where you can get more money than they have, they will be like, maybe they will feel less of a man. And so for them to do that, they will have to make sure that you don't get there so they retain that position. But I think it is wrong. A man should be able to support a woman, get to whatever position, even if it means earning more money than you are.
You just need to be in you know, in acceptance of it. Well, I see Robert over there in total, you know, nodding his head in disagreement. I don't know why. Robert, why are you nodding your head? What's not happening over there?
One, we must understand that it will take us some time.
But
we
when
are
can
so
that time be
excited
now?
over certain things.
Yes.
I want to be very honest. And I know that men and women that are watching us, if you look at case study by case study, I don't want to mention names. If you analyze what these marriages are today, if they are still there, many of them on a scale of 10, you may find only one happy marriage where the wife is in serious politics. I have no problem with an empowered wife. But you see the challenge with our politics today and where it's heading. It is politics of deceit, politics of a lot of things that one wouldn't feel very comfortable their wife moving into. That's why you see that most dominant women in our political arena are singles. Or are those that have had marriages that are somewhere. I don't want to believe that all these men are the problem. And also, finally, this gospel of women empowerment, I think somehow, we lost it. We didn't move for equity, we are moving for equality. Which for me, I believe, give all people equal opportunities. Yeah?
Yes.
But it's not about man and woman being equal. Because that has never been, neither in creation, neither in culture, neither will it be even in heaven. That Jesus will have a deputy, or one of the lead angels will be a woman. It will never be anywhere. Let's push for equity, not equality.
Well, this conversation will go on and on and on and on.
For Jesus.
We just agree to disagree.
You haven't been to
Why didn't
heaven.
you
I
go to
wouldn't
Harvard,
speculate. No, I wouldn't
We agree
speculate
to
about
disagree.
what happens in heaven. Because at least we have seen Mother Mary was a big story.
Because a woman had to give birth.
No.
Leading
She's still a
angels
pillar.
when you read
Well,
the Bible.
She's a pillar.
No,
She's a pillar.
leading angels. Jesus' disciples, how many prominent were women?
Away from the family issues, still over the weekend, like I did say at the start, some sad things happened, some good things happened. But of course, one of the unfortunate things that we did witness was the fires that did gut some of the kiosks around National Theatre. Now, this is really such a disastrous event because we did have very many businesses lose out on their products, lose out on, you know, a lot of money in all this. And this is going to be actually one of the things we will be discussing as Good Morning Uganda goes on. We'll be getting into the details. What's happening? Why are all these fires gutting several institutions in Uganda? I mean, recently we were having all these fires in schools and now spreading to these other businesses. And it's just not only 2022, taking you back to 2021, 2020. All that will be up in the discussion. But also for now, we take you through some of the news stories that we collected for you over the weekend. And of course, that is both locally and internationally. Starting off with some of the stories right here back at home.
We begin with His Excellency advising parents to properly feed their children to enable them grow up very well. This was in a message read to him by the Prime Minister at a wedding ceremony of one of the members of Parliament. That is, President Yoweri Museveni called for continued proper nutrition for children to enable them ably handle adult lives. This was contained in a message read for him by the Prime Minister of Uganda, Robert Nabanja, at a wedding ceremony of woman member of Parliament for Agago District, Beatrice Akello. The eye and material bliss was attended by the Chief Justice of Uganda, Nyonyintono, the Prime Minister, and the Deputy Speaker of Parliament, among others. She was joined by other members of Parliament who actively participated in ushering Akello into the new life. It is on this occasion that the Prime Minister, Robert Nabanja, was part of and read the President's speech. She was here to represent His Excellency. The President underscored the need for young people to marry after thorough background checks are conducted. The President thanked Akello Beatrice for her support to the NRM party and pledged continued development of the area. This was at Leader Proud Secondary School playground in Agago District.
And another story, Police Fire Brigade this Saturday midday extinguished fire burning 2 grass-thatched kiosks outside of the National Theatre. Now, the police reached the scene in time, the fast-spreading fire had already destroyed valuables in the kiosks, mainly boutiques and drinks. Now, those living in grass-thatched houses should never play with fire. Now, this has come to light as 2 grass-thatched kiosks in the compound of National Theatre were burnt by a midday fire, as a welder meddled with his tools. However, as the saying goes, a stitch in time saves 9. Police Fire Brigade responded pretty fast and managed the fire before it spread to the neighboring kiosks and cars within the National Theatre compound. Police Fire Brigade struggled with the simmering fire that was seething through the dry grass that acted as the roof of the container kiosks. Onlookers credited police for responding to their calls in time, and the containers were locked by the time police battled the fire. Now, the owners of the business of the burnt kiosks were not around by the time the fire broke out.
And away from the fire, we now look at land issues, where the Minister for Lands, Judith Nabakova, directed Uganda Police in Kampala South Region to identify those who wanted to forcefully take over Busabala playground on Sunday. The minister was in the area following the Deputy Speaker's directive over the matter, also halted any activity on the contested land. The Lands Minister, Judith Nabakova, went to this area, and it was found that during her visit, a resident identified as Sarongo Kibandwa Kibaya claimed to be the rightful owner of the contested land. The occupants of this land want government to bail them out. The meeting also was informed about the ownership claims by one Elizabeth Wava Mono. On the other hand, the land initially belonged to Buganda Kingdom. The minister later addressed a meeting that was attended by residents and area leadership.
Let's take a look at another story. A section of members of parliament have welcomed the recent singing over peace accord in South Sudan aimed at uniting fighting groups in one army. Tororo North County Member of Parliament Geoffrey Kanya says this will not only create more stability but also stop markets for weapons. The move is coming at a period where some refugees are reported to be returning home, according to the Minister for Disaster Preparedness and Refugee, Engineer Harry Oneg. Now, according to the minister, out of 1.6 million refugees living in Uganda, over 800,000 are from South Sudan. It is a country that has been at war with itself, rendering it insecure and unstable, forcing some of its citizens to flee for safety. But this instability, however, could soon come to an end if the recently signed peace accord to unite all fighting armies is anything to go by. Now, such gesture has been welcomed by some Ugandan leaders, including those in the refugee management sector. Recently admitted into the East African Community Region bloc, Uganda MPs want South Sudan to come clean with its efforts towards peace. Now, with guns failing silent and business returning to normality, there will be no war and therefore no more markets for weapons. Now, this is the emphasis by the Tororo North County Member of Parliament Geoffrey Kanya. In the meantime, efforts to make lives of the refugees comfortable in Uganda continue with the recent acquiring of funds to tarmac roads in refugee hosting communities. Now, the World Bank funded project is aimed at easing movement and boosting business. Uganda is currently home to about 1.6 million refugees, and the current influx is from Democratic Republic of Congo, a country recently admitted into the East African community.
Now onto the international news. The Queen has attended the final night of an equestrian extravaganza show to celebrate the Platinum Jubilee. The 96-year-old was met with a standing ovation as she arrived in the Castle Arena at the Royal Windsor Horse Show. Now, celebrities including Tom Cruise, Helen Mirren and Katherine Jenkins appeared in the open-air celebration. It has been running since Thursday night and is the beginning of celebrations to mark the Queen's 70-year reign. The crowd cheered as the smiling Queen arrived and made her way to the royal box, accompanied by the Earl of Wessex. She has mobility problems and has had to cancel a number of recent public appearances. However, the Queen was spotted on Friday at the horse show where one of her own horses was announced as a supreme champion. Well, away from that, gunmen deliberately sought black victims, according to mayor in the Buffalo shooting. The man suspected of shooting dead 10 people at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York, deliberately sought a site with a high black population, according to what the authorities say. The suspect, Peyton Gendron, 18, drove more than 320 kilometers to carry out the attack. This is according to the reports by the police. The attack is being investigated as an act of racially motivated violent extremism. Buffalo Mayor Byron Brown said the suspect arrived intending to take as many black lives as possible. Questions are being asked about how he was able to carry out the attack when he was already on the radar of authorities. Mr. Gendron had previously threatened the shooting at his high school last June, a law enforcement official told the Associated Press. He underwent a mental health examination afterwards. Now, a 180-page document seemingly authored by Mr. Gendron has emerged in which he describes himself as a fascist and a white supremacist. I want to know what people knew and when they knew it, New York Governor Kathy Hochul told ABC News. Now, police also say that the suspect had done reconnaissance of the area that day before the shooting. Now, moving to Somalia, Somalia's former leader Hassan Sheikh Mohamud has been elected president after a final vote that was held and only open to the country's MPs. He defeated the current president and, of course, Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo, who has been in office since 2017. The ballot was limited to Somalia's 328 members of parliament due to security concerns over holding a wider election, and one of them did not cast a vote. Mr. Mohammed received 214 votes, defeating Mr. Farmajo, who won 110 votes. 3 members of parliament are reported to have spoiled their ballots. Now, the unusual circumstances highlight Somalia's security issues as well as the lack of democratic accountability. The result marks a comeback for Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, who served as Somalia's president between 2012 and 2017 before he was defeated by Mr. Farmajo. The elections, which were hotly contested and went to a third round, were delayed for almost 15 months due to infighting and security issues. Mr. Mohammed was sworn in shortly after the final results were announced, prompting supporters in the capital to cheer and fire guns into the air. He will serve for the next 4 years. In the vote on Sunday, hundreds of parliamentarians cast their ballots at a fortified aircraft hangar in the capital, Mogadishu. Explosions could be heard nearby as voting was taking place, but police said no casualties were reported.
And in the weather and climate news, South Africa's April floods made twice as likely by climate crisis, scientists say. Now, the massive and deadly floods that struck South Africa in April were made twice as likely and more intense by global heating, according to scientists. Now, the research demonstrates that climate emergency is resulting into devastation. Catastrophic floods and landslides hit South African provinces of KwaZulu-Natal and Eastern Cape on 11th of April, following exceptional heavy rains. The South African President Cyril Ramaphosa called the floods a catastrophe of enormous proportions and the biggest tragedy that has ever been seen. Now, later also declaring a national state of disaster. At least 453 people were killed and the port of Durban, the largest in Africa, was closed, causing global disruption in the supply of food and minerals. Other recent studies found that the heat wave in North Pacific west of North America in 2021 would have been virtually impossible without climate change, and that global heating has exacerbated the extreme floods in Europe in July 2021, and also the storms in Madagascar, Malawi and Mozambique in January. If we do not reduce emissions and keep global temperatures below 1.5 degrees Celsius, many extreme weather events will become increasingly disruptive, says Dr. Izidin Pinto at University of Cape Town.
Well, also this morning in the poll question, we would appreciate it if we heard from you, especially when it comes to controlling fires in several of these institutions. Like I did say, statistics actually show that we've had several fires in 2021, 2020, and even the years back. And this morning, we would really love to hear from you. What do you think can be done to control fires in several of these institutions? Get back to us on our Twitter. The hashtag is UBCGMU, and of course you can always go traditional, send us an SMS text. Better yet, send us a WhatsApp message. The number is 0709602592. We'll be sharing all your thoughts with the rest of our Good Morning Uganda family. But also, speaking of family, yes, I know that Robert is big on family, he's big on health, he's big on boosting immunity, and that right there is why he comes in right about now.
Well, I'm holding these two darlings. Why I call them darlings? Because they save you that inconvenience you go through when you're sick, you know, and they also save that money. Most Ugandans, you find out that so much of your budget goes to treatment, and health is very expensive these days. So all you need to do is to boost your immune system by simply taking Hallelujah Jinga tea and Hallelujah turmeric drink. I know one of a member of our team, that is Nasa Mukasa, who will take these religiously, and you never see him fall sick any day. So my advice to you is take these products.
He actually looks very healthy, clearly. I think that's the power and the energy coming in from Alleluia. Well, we're getting into the inspiration for this Monday, and maybe, you know, the inspiration could wrap off on you for the rest of the week. When we get back, we'll be getting into the newsreel. We'll also be taking you to the papers later to see what made the headlines, New Vision, Daily Monitor and Daily Nation. Thereafter, we'll be taking you to the road to see the traffic situation, and more news coming in from the climate arena, and of course the weather focus from Mollen, Kenyena. And do not forget that GMU Agenda is also in the queue with Robert Kirabo. And later on, we'll be giving you the sports updates from Ruben Mpima Chividango. Well, Good Morning Uganda is definitely up for you. And in this very specific morning, we are streaming live. So yes, you can carry us anywhere and everywhere. We are with you all the way till 9 a.m. We'll be back right after this break. Good morning.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda.
It's exactly 5 minutes after 7 a.m. right here on Good Morning Uganda. Just in case you have joined in, well, welcome. And for you who has been with us early since morning, well, it's glad to see that you're still with us right here. Welcome to this segment, that is the Good Morning Uganda newsreel. My name is Philomena Mastiko once again. And again, I am with Robert Kirabo, Nyonyintono. We are here to discuss something that is really quite on very many lips of Ugandans, but also something that we need to have conversations about, and that is fires in several institutions. That has happened this year, last year, the year before that, and even other years. See what is happening, what is being done, you know, because we are having very many people lose their businesses to these fires. We are losing, you know, property worth millions and millions of Ugandan shillings. But before we get into that discussion, just remind you of the poll question this morning that is on our Twitter, and that is what can be done to control these fires in these institutions. Do give us your feedback. We want to pick a brain from you. And we share that with the rest of Uganda. Well, Robert, this morning, clearly the weekend was, of course, gutted with some good news, but some bad news. Yesterday, around the afternoon, we did see that some kiosks at the Uganda National Theatre and actually in the compound of Uganda National Theatre were gutted by fire. And of course, lucky for us, the fire services came in quickly and they were very handy, but of course quite a number of property had already been lost. And again, that also leaves us with very many questions. Now this is basically for yesterday, but also just to give you some statistics, what has been happening. Back in 2021, we had a covered painting processing facility in Makindye that also caught quite a crazy fire. I remember I was in one of these high buildings in Kampala. I could actually see what was happening. At least I could see the smoke coming out. But also back in September 2020, the iconic Ivory Tower at Makerere University, one of the most prestigious universities we have in Kampala or in Uganda, was gutted by fire, and a lot of property was lost. Records, of students, we all lost that. And again, we know how hard it is to recover all these things. So really, there are very many other institutions that have caught fire. But again, if we are to look into that, Robert, what could be the cause? And I mean, this year we saw also fires in schools, several schools, in several parts of Kampala. So when you look at all these, some of the causes, what are we not looking into, or what are we looking into that could be possibly the reason behind these fires?
Well, when we talk about fires in Uganda, this is one of the silent issues that are affecting Ugandans. When you talk about traders, where today we see this Ham shopping mall, many people there lost a lot of their properties. If you remember the parkyard, now I'm going to the ordinary person. That place gutted about 2 times, and every time there were losses. Recently we saw the building that houses the office of the Chief Justice when it caught fire.
Yes.
The Maif offices here, stores, just here in Wandegea, caught fire, and recently when we had this outbreak of the African army worm, one of the experts I hosted said that the pesticide they had stocked was all destroyed in this. So there are many incidents where we can talk about fires that have destroyed property worth millions. But even when you look at our statistics, for example, the first 5 months of 2021, you find that police registered 600 fires. And this was an increment of about 40% of what it had registered in 2020 in terms of fires. And in these fires, you find that we lost about 50 people compared to the previous year, where we had lost 18 persons in these fires. So it is a problem. It is a growing problem, by the way. And sometimes we do not give it the priority it deserves when it comes in terms of budget allocation. But going back to what could be the causes of these fires, also it is very unfortunate that most of these fires, police rarely comes out with a clear report indicating the causes of this fire.
Yes.
For any doubt, ask police, where's the report regarding the Budo Inferno, where we saw young girls at Budo Junior School perish. We can name a number of them, and they do not come up with this report. They will tell you, first and foremost, when fires occur, the scene of crime, all these incidents are contaminated. When a fire is happening, everyone wants to do something. So at the end of the day, what they would use to gather evidence to determine the actual cause, away from preliminary investigations, we suspect, but coming up with a conclusive report. Once the scene has been messed with, contaminated, then they will hear, we suspect arson, we suspect this, we suspect that. But a report that we can rely on, usually in terms of fires, we don't get them. But usually it is electricity. For the few incidents, Ugandans want shortcuts. When a person is constructing a building and they are told to have qualified people carry out the installation, they'll look for what we normally know as Kamyufu. Those will work at half price.
Yes.
Where a professional will tell you that I need cables of this width and this length, a Kamyufu will tell you, nechino chikola, nechili chikola. At the end of the day, you will have this building of billions constructed, and then the wiring system is a risk and a time bomb. And that is why we have something small, electricity. Second, most of the times when you have these fires, arson sometimes is also a matter where someone deliberately. But we've also had still abandoned appliances. That is also still in connection to electricity. However, most of these fires have also come as a way of carelessness. If you go to markets, usually there's someone who leaves a charcoal stove. You know where they have these kiosks and what? Someone leaves a charcoal stove. When you go to the fire of National Theatre, a police report is not yet out.
Yes.
But I'm depending on what the police officers who were at the scene said. And what I've seen some senior officers allude to, that is welding. Now, welding is an act of carelessness where fire sparks off. Because this welding machine, many people know what welding is, those sparks off of fire, if they land on any material that easily catches fire, very compatible material, it's very easy for fire to start. And you see, when a fire begins in only 5 minutes, if not controlled, the damage cannot be underestimated. So you have carelessness, you have arson, you have electricity. Those are the three leading causes of fires in Uganda.
Well, and actually when you look at that, some of the reasons, of course, people give you is that sometimes people are really not very attentive, especially in these areas where we find very many people in the same place, or, you know, these buildings where we have very many people in the same area. Everybody believes that it's somebody else's responsibility. It's not my business. I'm not supposed to be controlling this. But again, it just zeroes back to you because, I mean, you're bound to lose property, or you're bound to lose lives if especially fire catches the business in this area. But also speaking about these fires, Robert, National Theatre, yes, it did happen. And in several instances, yesterday we were very lucky that the fire services were in response, very, very fast response. They came through and did what they did. But if you're to look at some of the stories behind and some of the fire outbreaks in all these institutions, areas or buildings, they will tell you by the time the fire services arrived, by the time these people were in place, a lot of property had already been lost. Probably the whole building was already down. Now, from what I understand is that they are supposed to be instant. When you call in, they come and at least try to save a few people. Now, when you look at situations where we've even lost people, you'd wonder why were they not able to make in time? So why do we already see this? Because even in the reports, they will tell you that by the time they arrived on the scene, a lot had already gone down. You know, we have registered a lot of damages. So that response, why is it not instant? Why are we looking at, you know, because I would expect if I call in, you can come in maybe in a span of about 10-15 minutes. Again, still that is a lot of time because fire will not know 10 or 15 minutes. But why are we looking at all these late responses?
Well, first I want to cast the blame on us individuals. That most of the times, by the time we call in the fire and rescue services, first is we've tried and we've failed. If fire gutted this building, the first thing is none of us would think of calling in the fire rescue services. We would first try our effort.
Yes.
Bring water, bring a basin. Bring sand, bring a blanket. Bring this puree.
We think that we can do that on our own.
So it is only when we have failed that we call in the rescue service. So ask Ugandans, how many of you know the number? You know? How many of you have it? Because this, for any responsible Ugandan, you must know the number of the fire services.
Yes.
You must know the number of the nearest police station or police unit within your vicinity. Yes. Within your area. If it is your OC in that area, you must have their number. You must have their contacts. You must know the number of your LC chairperson. So we don't have these numbers. We first fight the fire. When it is overboard, now you're like, how can we get, who has the connection? Then you spend another 30 minutes looking for that number. You don't have the LC there.
Meanwhile, the fire is still...
Meanwhile, the fire is going on. So before we even look at other areas, let's first ask ourselves, to what extent have we interested ourselves in knowing these numbers that matter so much? So we take long, we try our best. When the fire is almost finishing the entire building, we call the fire brigade.
Yes.
If most of these fires, you know, they have a call center that records what time the call came in and how fast it took them to get to the scene, you're going to find out that most of these fires within Kampala, Nachivubo, where the time they receive the call and the minutes they take to get to the scene, sometimes they arrive and they would have saved, but unfortunately, they are called when there is little to save. 2, we must look at accessibility. There are some places, National Theatre is accessible.
Yes.
But there are some places where they are not easily accessible. For example, 60% of Ugandans stay in slum areas. And here the roads, when a fire breaks out, even the fire van cannot get to that area. It is inaccessible. In Uganda, there are people that have homes where a car cannot get there.
It has to stop.
It has
at a
to be a
certain
border.
distance, yes.
If it is something they have to carry to their place. So it is not by choice, but that is the challenge in fighting fire. 2, jam, traffic jam. If there is a fire at a rush hour, I want to guarantee you it will be very, very hard for a fire van to get to that area to rescue. It will get there very late. Second, Ugandans, I don't know what is happening. We no longer respect vehicles that have right of way. Maybe because this has been abused, that now anyone who owns a car maybe above 150 million thinks they have right of way,
yes,
and they can install sirens. So maybe Ugandans have gotten used to it, that even when a genuine siren is made, they may not give the right of way, unless they are soldiers and or there are serious indicators that HE is passing. But even his convoy, the man has just passed. His Excellency, you see people bump into the convoy.
Yes.
So we've lacked respect. The roads are bad, there's traffic jam, and there are people who do not respect the siren. So they are delaying this fire truck. Then, fourthly, why we see that sometimes there's a lot of damage being caused when we have these fire incidents. You find that even directions to places. You know, in the Western world, or in some developed countries, use Google Map. There are areas where you can easily direct a person.
Yes.
But today someone will tell you, fires gutted this place, and informs police. How do we get there? We don't have clear signs. It's only in some areas where you find kabogos are closed, you know. There's some areas where they have those features that you can tell someone that maybe National Theatre next to Parliament.
Yes.
Everybody now may know next to Parliament. But for some places, if you're directing someone and you have a phone call, Office of the Chief Justice on fire. Now, an ordinary person, even these fire trucks, I've seen them on several occasions, the drivers being lost, they are consulting.
Yes.
Someone has called us, do you know this place, do you know this place? Okay, you go this way, go that way. So we lack proper identifications of some places. And this is what I always advise people. If you have some, maybe a factory, or make sure there are some features. Ugandans don't know how to direct, but you can't blame them.
Yes.
We direct using, you can use buildings, non-buildings, you know, but that is also another big challenge to these firefighters.
Now, of course, we cannot talk about fires in Uganda or anywhere else and you fail to make mention of insurance. Now, I'll just give you something that came through from the Insurance Regulatory Authority CEO, that is Mr. Ibrahim Kadunabi. He actually did say the uptake on insurance of most of, especially government properties, is very, very low. And I think it was about 2021 where he was addressing some members of parliament, and he did say government needs to start insuring some of their old assets. He went ahead to give an example, saying that maybe if the Ivory Tower at Makerere University had been insured, it would have already been sorted. And we see very many government cars getting accidents, you know, fire outbreaks, and even in all these other buildings, in all these other institutions. But surprisingly, the government of Uganda apparently is also not very, very serious when it comes to, you know, insuring all these old assets, which I believe should be really ideal, because if it's an old asset, that means it holds a lot, probably records and very many other things that you can't afford to lose. And like for any other, you know, building in Uganda or in Kampala, where, you know, you have very many people running their businesses in there, you also have people who work there day in, day night. So when we look at insurance in Uganda, especially when it comes to these buildings, I mean, how are we doing as a country? Because I feel like it's still one of those fairy tales, especially for most Ugandans. They really don't believe in insurance. Some do understand the value of insurance, but some others, it really takes a whole lot for you to convince them to see why they need to insure their property, their old assets, and all these things.
Very interesting question, Philo. I really love that issue of insurance. But if I go to insurance briefly, I also want to urge the authorities in this country.
Yes.
That please, most to be particular, that is the National Building Review Board. We need to improve on issues of fire hydrants. Most of the times we have fires, and these vehicles have to go to these stations to get water, then come and fight fire. I remember the Makerere University fire you talked about.
Yes.
Vehicles,
which lasted for 2 days.
Vehicles had to go all the way to the refilling center, that is at a clock tower, then come and put off a fire at Makerere. Yet if there were fire hydrants, these are water sources. When they were planning this city, the whites, and almost every point we had fire hydrants, that when there's a fire, the van just gets there, then they connect their hose pipes,
yes,
and they can stop. But today we have buildings, we have hotels, we have arcades, we have malls on these fire hydrants. So when a fire is there, much as the fire trucks could be there, because a truck can carry water for a certain period of time, then it will be emptied. It has to be refilled to fight this, so we have to look at that. Now with insurance, for third world countries, there are things that are just cropping up. Insurance is one of those that many people have not yet appreciated. Let's even go to individual level.
Yes.
You can tell someone to have an health insurance, and they will tell you, I can't have money to save for health insurance. You know, I live hand to mouth. Yet they could even be able to do that. You tell someone cars, comprehensive and all this, people will wonder why.
They do it because they know it's one of the necessities, but
so it's something that is not part of us. We do not believe in unfortunate things or uncertainties. So we think it's going to be okay. And second, also the insurers have a big role to play to convince Ugandans that we shall come to you in time of need if you're insured. I've driven. I've had a few accidents, but I've never had proper use of my third party. Many people will tell you, you know someone, still you hustle it out. When you go to these companies, they make it very hard to assist you. They have to come out, and they have people who can testify. But I want to tell you, go and do a survey. Many people who have third party, to when and how have they benefited from this? It is a requirement for every vehicle, you know,
yes,
for a motorcycle to have this. But how many times have you seen this third party useful to you in terms of an accident? Some people have insured property, and in terms of uncertainty, this insurance, some of them have cheated these Ugandans. So there are so many bad stories than the good stories when it comes to insurance. That is why you'll find that many people don't see the desire. In my lifetime, I think it was one commissioner in internal affairs whose car had issues and he was compensated. The one politician, this Mamerito of Chiras something.
Yes.
Why? So his vehicle being what? He got another one. Said, okay, now this is insurance. But how many? Most of these stories they will tell you, and it was insured. Follow up.
Yes.
It is hard. They need to transform as the National Social Security Fund has done, where previously it was a dream for someone to get the NSSF. Today, NSSF has upped its game. And now people have confidence. You even have midterm. When a person just have your papers properly, get your claims. Come to insurance. Philo, insurance. Either people are not sensitized, or this is how they are amassing wealth that many people do not benefit, do not see the use. And now, why would I get money? Because insurance is not free. I have to insure a building with a certain percentage of money.
Yes.
And if I'm going to get money, for example, if you're to insure UBC, I'm just giving an example. Annually, you would even go into a lot of money, by the way. And if People hear stories of we did, but when this incident happened, they have very smart lawyers that can outsmart you. They'll tell you so many times, the driver in that car, was it the driver? Now this, now that. At the end of the day, if they do not come clean, it is going to be very hard for them to have a breakthrough for Ugandans to do that. That is why you will only see in issues of maybe school fees, is it prudential, something like that. Then there's a class of Ugandans now that is appreciating health, health insurance. We don't have a national scheme, but at least a few people that can afford now are going into that direction, more so when they are aging. And then now you regular visit, but a young man, 24, 30, health insurance, they will look at you. So we need more sensitization and of course more positivity in terms of benefits from these various insurance schemes.
Well, now all has been said, but what can actually be done, Robert? Because again, this is, it looks like a recurring problem. We are seeing this, we have seen these things happen in the previous years. And I mean, you know, I'm not a prophet of doom, but anything can happen at any time.
Especially even depending on statistics, they're just increasing.
They're just increasing, but what can be done? What can be, when you look at our regulatory enforcement, especially when it comes to these buildings, when it comes to incidences like this, are we doing well? Where can we improve? Because that right there, I believe there are certain loopholes that we need to just fill up.
First, I'll look at the element of prevention. One, we need more sensitization regarding fires. One, firefighting and fire prevention. How do we prevent fires? That is where you find that here in Uganda, a person will build and they'll not factor in the element of fire. You find these arcades. One is attached to the other as if they're sealed with gum. Not even any space. People buy a plot and they attach exactly this building to the next building. Instead of leaving a gap, in case there is a fire, maybe this space between. So that is all about sensitization. That someone will have knowledge and know that fire, if I have this space, maybe it can save. Two, we need to ensure that regulators are empowered. When we look at Uganda, we have a body, and that is the National Building Review Board. This is a semi-autonomous government of Uganda body under the Ministry of Works and Transport and was established under Section 3 of the Building Control Act 2013. Now, its role is to monitor, to supervise building developments in this country. Because we have a code that when you're setting up a building, you should have this, you should have that, you should have this. But many of the buildings set up today do not have that. Kampala Capital City Authority, the planning, in these plans, how do we factor in fire prevention? Inspection, how many buildings have fire extinguishers? And how many of those buildings carry out drills? When we had the Budo fires and the rampant school fires, buildings had begun these. Every building is supposed to have a fire assembly point, well indicated that in case there is a fire and someone sounds an alarm, we run and assemble at that point. Every building is supposed to have an exit, a fire exit. You find an entire floor. These fire exits were blocked. They are locked. In case there is a fire, where you should run to, it is locked.
It's actually locked.
It's actually locked. So monitoring, supervision, then right from the onset of construction of these buildings, fire is something that must be properly factored in terms of prevention. The building structure, those that authorize plans, you know, how do you authorize a plan of a building where a car cannot get there? Even when the bricks were taken through other means to construct that building. But you're a city planner and you authorize that building. Second, we must add more money to this fire and rescue services directorate so that they are in many places. Yes, I must say there has been something done, but with 8 billion shillings annually, you find it is a challenge. How much does a van cost, a fire van? How many districts do you have? In Uganda today, cities are growing, are mushrooming, and all these need to have these fires because local governments that are mandated to do this seemingly have very little money at their cost, and fire may not be a priority.
Well, also one thing, Robert, I know that we need to do as Ugandan is being very consistent. You talked about, the fire drills. We did that because at that time the fires were rampant. And then when we had a period over there where we couldn't see, well, at least they had ceased down a little bit, we also forgot about that. So I know one thing for sure is that we as Ugandans, we are very inconsistent. We do some things because of the pressure or because of the prevailing situation. But again, you never know when you might actually be in that same situation as well. We need to be very consistent. And all these buildings, everybody has to partake in this and do your role, because you cannot do it for a very small period of time. Because again, like we told you, the statistics are growing. Fires in all these buildings clearly will be coming up anytime now if you're not ready. So the word here is be very ready, and also do all that you have to do to make sure that you avoid such circumstances, especially in all these places where you have very many people's lives at stake, but also a lot of property at stake. Well, that's it for this morning's newsreel. We'll be getting into the papers now, and that is the Daily Monitor, the New Vision, and the Daily Nation. Later on, we'll be getting onto the traffic updates to see what's happening on the Kampala roads. But also, just to remind you of our poll question this morning, we would love to find out from you what you can actually think, or what you think can be done to control all these fires in several of these institutions in Uganda. That right there, we'll be getting into your responses, your feedback, and sharing it, and come together to see if we can get solutions to take away this problem, or at least to put it under control. Good morning.
Get connected today with the My Airtel 4G smartphone and enjoy free data for 1 whole year worth 86,500 Uganda shillings. That's free 2 GB for the first month and free 1 GB for the next 11 months at only 250,000 Uganda shillings, with free data for 1 whole year worth 86,500 shillings, making the effective price of the 4G phone 163,500 shillings only. Airtel, the smartphone network.
It's no secret that ICT makes learning easy.
The strides made in our field couldn't be possible without it.
And now we can watch our favorite show.
My radio is my best friend.
UCC provides an enabling regulatory environment and policy guidance for healthy competition. We also facilitate ease of doing business in the communications sector through licensing, standardization, spectrum management, tariff regulation, rural communication development, and consumer empowerment. An informed consumer is an empowered consumer. UCC supports local content and innovations. Driving the development of a robust communication sector in Uganda is Uganda Communications Commission.
When you talk about our motherland Uganda, the pearl of Africa, you cannot fail to smile because of the smile that fills the faces of the citizens. Our nice good weather and nature that sustains us all, that enables us all to continue each in their own way, because we are all different even according to each individual's work. But what joins us to become one person is the sweetness from the flavored drink Alleluia Jingati drink and Alleluia Tamarind drink. The flavor that quenches your thirst while at the same time treating and healing your body, because it is 100% natural. Enjoy the drink that has got the tamarind juice in it. Made by Alleluia Reflexology, Healthy Solutions and Nutritional Research Center Limited. Get yourself a bottle of Alleluia from all shops around.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda.
Well, in the press review this morning, starting off with the Daily Monitor, the big headline over there being government to capture DNA on new national IDs. And of course, that is in line of profiling Ugandans, besides, of course, the genetic information. Now, also, you need to know what else they are going to be capturing for these new national IDs. We'll also take a look at Bush war generals among 34 in the exit lounge. And the Daily Monitor, there you will see about 7 pictures of some of the generals we are talking about, and when they will be exiting, or what is the plan looking like in concernment, of course, of their departure. And still in more news, fake diapers on the markets. This is a warning that has come in from experts. So if you're a new mother, well, or a mother in general, you clearly need to take note of this. And still, media public barred from accessing Best J home. The story is on page 4, so you can go in there and get more. Now, looking at the panorama, could suspect in Kagezi killing be hiding in Europe? Well, the pages are 24 and 25 for the full story over there. Moving on to the second page, we're taking you to the archives, and over there we see that the Lieutenant Colonel John Mugume and Colonel retired Dr. Kizza Besigye during UPDF elections on June 30th back in 1996. And today in history, Indians demand seats on the LegCo, and this was back in 1921 when all these Indians really made their request. And still today in history, Japan's Tebei becomes first woman to climb Mountain Everest. She did break a record over there, and that is why you need to read this story this morning to get the details. Well, also taking you through the New Vision this morning.
Well, in the New Vision for this morning, 12,000 schools operate illegally. And that is according to the survey conducted by Education Ministry. Well, much more to that on page 3 of the New Vision for this morning. But also in the New Vision, district staff flee on seeing State House team. Why they are fleeing, or why the State House team is there, get more on that story. That is on page 9 of the New Vision. But also in the New Vision, they give you a big picture right there as Bunyoro gets another sugar factory. Well, with President Yoweri Museveni arriving at the Chiyandongo Crest Sugar Factory that he launched on Saturday. There is much more to that story. That is on page 13 of the New Vision for this morning. Well, the coffee deal, MPs, President Museveni agree. Well, looks like there is light at the end of the tunnel. Now there is much more to that on page 7 of the New Vision. Also, the New Vision gives you 34 generals to retire from the army. Much more on that on page 4. They also give you a picture of General Eli Tumwine in the list right there. But also on page 2 of the New Vision, they give you today in history. That is the May 16th, 1993. Seba Taka fails to attend seminar. Well, that is also right there. And also today in history on the May 16th, 1997, Mobutu goes into exile. You can get more on that by getting yourself a copy of the New Vision. They also give you a picture right there of the fire gas shops at National Theatre, and they show you how the police fire brigade was actually lighting out the fires. Refugees in business to get support, more opportunities in business as well. Get yourself a copy of the New Vision.
And in the sports section for the Daily Monitor, Uhuru abandons boxing presidency, and Chinji Bosa was handing over tools of power of the UPBC presidency to Uhuru in March 2018 in the big picture over there. And still taking you to the Chabazinga that kicked off the Masaza Cup. Well, if you're an ardent follower, maybe it's time for you to actually really become the follower that you are. Relegation dumps police in deep abyss. Now, taking you to the English Premier League, we'll look at a hammer blow after Man City's title push was pegged by West Ham in a 2-2 draw that invites FA Cup champions Liverpool back in. The story is on page 37, so make sure you catch up on that one. And also looking at the chic corporate Kampala Queens face a decisive week. This is in the Women Premier League. Well, you do have to follow up on that on the second page of the Daily Monitor this morning.
for this morning. They give you a picture right now of Uganda's massacre destined to Washington, USA. Touring the living university. Well, it looks like the count is on. That is as the Legion University sports ground is getting really good. I'll also giving you pictures of East Africa Cup Netball Champions, that is NIC, and the old moment after beating the CDA in the Saturday finals of the Kampala. So that is over there in the Legion sport for this morning. I also give you the fifth rivalry, well, between Tonga shooting, I think the former KCAFC and great player.
Well, taking you to the Daily Nation this morning, well, we are still talking the elections, and we're looking at Ruto's biggest gamble yet, and also Sonko Stars Coast Revolt. The story is on page 13. And again, in more news, why transition to junior high could blot the CBC. And looking at the health, that is NHIF in eye of a storm over police cover. And missing in action, we see quite the Professor Kithure, the astute lawyer who gave up his governorship dreams in the hope of being DP, is now counting his losses. Well, I mean, it's politics, so you are bound to do that. Remember that we are on a countdown, and we have less than 90 days now to see who will be the next president of Kenya. So we're on the lookout and the watch out as well. Anytime now, we'll be seeing what is happening, and we are following. So grab yourself the Daily Nation this morning to also make a very serious follow-up on that. Now, the poll question definitely is still running on our social media, and of course we would just love to hear from you, especially what you think can be done to control these fires that we have seen in several of our institutions, and that is what can be done to curb the increasing fire outbreaks in Ugandan institutions. What can be done to curb the increasing fire outbreaks in Ugandan institutions? The hashtag is UBCGMU, and you can send us a message or WhatsApp message at 0709602592. But also on the roads this morning, Monday morning is quite a busy one, and of course we have several factors that come into play. We have children going back to school, we have parents dropping off children to school, but also it's a Monday, people have come back from the weekend, so everybody has probably something to do in town, and the roads are quite very busy. So this morning, if you are accessing the city center, and I want to focus on the Kampala Central Division, if your plans are to use Yusuf Lule Road, if your plans are to use John Babiha Road, well, all these roads are actually very busy because the traffic is very intense in several of these places, and that's because again we have quite very many people using the roads at the same time. We have the pedestrians, we have the cyclists, we also have the motorists of all kinds of nature. And also, if you're accessing the Kampala city again, right from the main Jinja Road, well, the highway is very busy because it's the main road, and we have very many other cars pouring into the main road as they're connecting from all the shortcuts. So beware of that, and if you're planning to use it, ideally you could have an option B. If you don't, then you need to plan to be very patient because it's very busy this morning. But also, if you're coming in from the sides of Wandegea, Bombo Road is actually a little bit free, so if you're getting into the city center or leaving the city center using Bombo Road, well, it shouldn't be a very big problem for you. And again, if you are leaving the city center and you want to use Buganda Road, which is a one-way, it's quite clear this morning, so there is nothing for you to worry. You could navigate through it because it's quite clear, like I did say. And again, if you're using the lower side of Kampala Road, that is if you're connecting in from Entebbe Road, if you're using Station Road, well, that is quite a busy one because we also have quite some red spots over there. So there is nothing for you to do unless you can, of course, always think about an alternative, but you have to be patient. But again, also a tip for you this morning, you need to make sure that you have your car in a very good mechanical condition. On my way to work this morning, I did come across about 2 school vans, and these are school vans that I'm talking about. They had children, but they were really in such a bad mechanical condition. The bus or the van is on the road, it's shaky, you could look at the tires and you worry for the safety of these children. So as an individual, as a parent, as a school administration, this is just a call out to you. Make sure your cars, your vans are all in a good condition to be on our Ugandan roads. And again, like I already say, prioritize other people's lives, but also your life as well. We've had quite an escalating number of accidents in the last couple of days, months, so we don't want to have this number increase. You don't want your life, your child's life, your neighbor's life, your friend's life to be a statistic. It would be very, very dreadful for anybody. So make sure your cars are well checked, take them for servicing, do what you have to do to make sure they are well kept in a good mechanical condition before they get onto the roads. Well, that's it from traffic updates this morning, but also to take you to Mollen and giving us the weather forecast this morning. Mollen, I think the rains are really reducing, because every time I look at the app, you know, the percentages, they would be telling me, you know, there are 90% chances of rain the next day. They keep on reducing. So the last time I checked, which was about yesterday, they told me there are 50% chances of the rains. Are we looking at the rains decreasing now? Should we start, keeping away the sweaters?
Well, it looks like the rains are actually starting to decrease, because if you take a look into even the forecast that was given out earlier for the March to May rainy season, this is supposed to be the time when the rains now start to go down to allow for drier conditions for June and July. However, it's also one of the peak days that we have seen in this season have been in May. So that means that we're still on a lookout for more rains coming through, and could be having more rainy days ahead until we end March. I would say keep that sweater on.
Well, you don't want to take chances. You could just always keep it in the car or keep it with you. And well, we're yet to see how this will end. Well, that's it for the traffic updates this morning. My name is Philomena Mastiko. I want to wish you a wonderful Monday and productive Monday morning, and also a very great week ahead as we start it off right about now.
Well, while we talk about rains, we also have to remember that the same rains do get into extreme events. That is, if we talk about heavy downpour, of course, resulting into flooding, landslides, like it was the case in South Africa, KwaZulu-Natal province, where we did see a lot of catastrophe that has now been termed as one of the biggest floods and extreme weather events for South Africa in the last 2 decades that is taking on that province. Now, that flood that happened in South Africa, KwaZulu-Natal, took up to 453 lives. That is according to what reports that were coming out from South Africa. But also what we do know is that global warming has made South African recent floods twice as likely, according to the study that did come out earlier this morning. Now, what they are saying in South Africa is that, at least from what was able to be put to piece together by scientists, they are looking at this event related to climate change, because there has been more rise in temperatures over the area, but also the fact that these extreme weather events have come at a huge frequency. That means the number of times that they're happening over the area are contrary to what was happening in the past, and all this has now been related to climate change. And obviously, South Africa has been one of those countries in Africa that have fared well when it comes to adapting to climate change. However, you cannot adapt to death. So when there is extreme weather event and it's coming through, however much adaptive capacity that you have, it's still going to affect citizens. It's still going to destroy property. So this is why South Africa is coming up to say, well, there is need for climate action. And at this point, it doesn't matter how much finances you have to cope with the changing weather. It is changing, and it is obviously going to come with disaster. And this is what was highlighted as the scientists are now agreeing to say this was one of the hugest that the country has seen in the last 2 decades. And they also add that when extreme downpour happens, it will be expected to be at least 4 to 8% heavier if no human-induced global warming had occurred. So meaning that all that is fueling into these extreme weather events is the fact that humans have gotten involved, especially with contributing to climate change. That means by our poor habits when it comes to, industrialization, when it comes to deforestation, and all these things that we're doing, especially use of fossil fuels, that is now top rank when it comes to contributing to the heating across the globe, not just in South Africa. But also, we did see one of the islands that have been hit worst by climate variations, which is Tuvalu. The minister did come out to say that right now they are calling for help. And we saw him actually last year in Glasgow when he was making a presentation standing in the sea, and that is the Tuvalu Minister for Environment. Well, he was making a mark that was indicative that Tuvalu is sinking into the Pacific, and now he's fearing that because of the superpower kind of grab that is there between the United States and China, they could be the ones suffering the consequences. Well, Simon Kofe, who is the Minister for Foreign Affairs as well, did highlight the fact that Tuvalu could be looking at more of extreme weather events that could lead into the island sinking underwater as sea level is rising. And he says that he fears that his nation of 12,000 people could actually be into a catastrophe as he looks at 40% of the capital district underwater on high tide. And the forecast that is coming through that he has analyzed indicates that it could only get worse. Now, what he's saying is that he's calling on the United States, China, to look into how they can help instead of looking at, how to gain power over who. And this is something that he also highlighted, by the way, last year when he was addressing at COP26 in Glasgow, because he did say that while vulnerable countries or islands like we have seen in Tuvalu, islands like Fiji, are struggling to cope up with the changing climate, all these power states, all these developed nations are only manufacturing more and more of instruments that have in turn contributed to the rising in temperatures. So that means that when you look at China right now, it's the biggest emitter or even contributor to the greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere, and that has been a fact for quite a while. So now, instead of them diverting the energy into helping islands like that are on the verge of sinking, or even poor vulnerable countries, instead they're making much more of more renewable, non-renewable energy facilities. And that is what the minister is saying. Divert that money and help out countries that are actually vulnerable to the climate change that they less contribute to. And that's a kind of message that I think also is being brought out by most of the developing countries, especially across Africa, because we do contribute just a minimum amount to this climate change emergency. But again, we suffer the most when the extreme weather comes because we don't have the adaptive capacity to cope up. And this is where we're getting it all wrong. However, there is also some good news that is coming through, because we have seen big companies also coming up to lay out their strategies when it comes to moving to renewable energy and cutting carbon emissions in the atmosphere. Now, we do know that most of the motor companies right now are on a spot because we want a transition to electric cars. Now, Chevron did come out, that is a US energy company, to also look at how they can move directly into not depending on fossil fuels. Now, Chevron, they're also manufacturers of cars, but also ExxonMobil Corp did come out to sign an agreement with a state energy company in the US to make sure that whatever they will be producing from now on will be aiming at going for electric cars and also cutting their emissions. Now, that is some good news when you see such big companies actually agreeing to the fact that they will be going for that line that was agreed upon in COP26 Glasgow Pact. Now, while they were talking to Reuters news agency, they did explain that Chevron has been having global cuts in emissions over the last 5 years. However, they have not done this kind of drastic way to sign an agreement actually with energy companies in the US. So that means that at least now we know that they have a commitment in line by signing that agreement. So we could even be looking at electric cars much earlier than what was anticipated, which was 2035. To move directly to the most of those electric cars. But well, that is some good news that is coming through, and we can embrace that. Away from that, we also want to come back and take a look at the weather that is happening across the country for this morning, and we'll be tapping in from our satellites over Uganda.
which appears to be having mostly sunny weather across most areas within the country. It looks like we did start off with much more of that sun, where you see the open grey skies. That is where we're having sunny conditions for this morning across the eastern part of the country, the Karamoja region, the central north, where we have Gulu, Lira, we have Padel, Jumani. That area is having sunny weather as we speak. And we're also looking at much of central Uganda, where we are also starting off with most of that sun as well. We do have a few clouds that are developing, but that is mostly across the West Nile. That is where you're looking at those blue colors right there. That is where we do have some clouds that are forming up, and most likely they will be bringing us some rains later on, but just over a few places in the Midwestern. Masindi right there also having a cloudy morning across parts of Hoima, all the way up to the western stretch, Fort Portal as well. That is up to southwestern Uganda as well. Mbarara having mostly intervals of sunny and cloudy conditions, and Kampala as we speak also dealing with sunny weather. Entebbe as well. Masaka looking at a sunny morning, and most likely that will continue for quite a couple of hours from now, but we do have some rains in the forecast. We'll go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast for this morning, and that is coming in from the Uganda National Meteorological Authority. We'll start off with the western parts of Lake Victoria. That is where we're forecasting in terms of sunny and cloudy conditions, and temperatures will be starting at a pleasant 26 degrees centigrade. Across southwestern Uganda, where we have Mbarara, Ibanda, Bushenyi and Rubirizi, we're forecasting sunny intervals, starting off with a cool 25. We do expect rains to develop over that area later in the afternoon. Across Mount Elgon Highlands, where we have Mbale, Bududa, Boko, Sironko, we're forecasting intervals of sunny and cloudy conditions, also starting off with a pleasant 26 degrees centigrade. Soroti, Katakuya, Moria, Kumi, we already have sunny weather over there. We do expect that sun to continue as the morning progresses, starting off with a hot 28 degrees centigrade, and we do expect more sunny weather even later in the afternoon across the area. The eastern side of Lake Victoria, Jinja, Tororo, Busia and Iganga, we're forecasting isolated showers. Those will be developing later as the day progresses, starting off with a warm 27 degrees centigrade. Across the central parts of northern Uganda, where we have Gulu, Kitgum, Padel and Jumani, we're already having sunshine over the area, and that is expected to continue throughout the morning, starting off with a hot 28 degrees centigrade. The eastern part of central, where Wombenzi, Buduri, we have Nakaseke there. We're forecasting a mix of clouds and sunshine, also starting off with quite a warm 28 degrees centigrade. Now back in the central part of Lake Victoria, where we have Kampala, Entebbe, Gwakiso and Mukono, we're forecasting isolated showers. Those will be coming in later as the day progresses, and the morning is expected to be quite cool at temperatures of 24 degrees centigrade. We do expect most of those rains also to reappear in the afternoon, especially for areas that are close to Lake Victoria. Now it looks like most of the country is actually dealing with sunny weather for this morning, and temperatures are starting to rise a bit compared to what we have been dealing with in the last couple of days. So maybe it is good news if you really don't like the cold weather. But I will leave you at that. We do have Good Morning Uganda agenda coming up, and later we'll also be having sports highlights by Ruben. Well, I know that there is a lot in there with sports, especially with the joy around the FA Cup. I know I'm happy. I don't know about other people, but Ruben will be here to take you through that, and then later we will be going through Good Morning Uganda Extra, that is by Jagenda Semakula. My name is Mollen, Kenyena. I want to wish you a wonderful morning.
This is Good Morning Uganda.
When you talk about our motherland Uganda, the Pearl of Africa, you cannot fail to smile because of the smile that fills the faces of the citizens. Our nice good weather and nature that sustains us all, that enables us all to continue each in their own way, because we are all different even according to each individual's work. But what joins us to become one person is the sweetness from the flavored drink Alleluia Jingati drink and Alleluia Tamarind drink. The flavor that quenches your thirst while at the same time treating and healing your body because it is 100% natural. Enjoy the drink that has got the tamarind juice in it. Made by Alleluia Reflexology, Healthy Solutions and Nutritional Research Center Limited. Get yourself a bottle of Alleluia from all shops around.
Pick of the day on UBC. Was brought to you by.
Need to send money to a loved one but you don't have enough on your phone? Get away with MTN Momo Advance. Momo Advance tops up your Momo to complete your transactions. Dial *165*5*3# to apply. MTN Momo Advance is always available when you need it.
It's no secret that ICT makes learning easy.
The strides made in our field couldn't be possible without it.
Until now, we can watch our favorite show.
My radio is my best friend.
UCC provides an enabling regulatory environment and policy guidance for healthy competition. We also facilitate ease of doing business in the communications sector through licensing, standardization, spectrum management, tariff regulation, rural communication development, and consumer empowerment. An informed consumer is an empowered consumer. UCC supports local content and innovations. Driving the development of a robust communication sector in Uganda is Uganda Communications Commission.
Get connected today with the My Airtel 4G smartphone and enjoy free data for 1 whole year worth 86,500 Uganda shillings. That's free 2 GB for the first month and free 1 GB for the next 11 months at only 250,000 Uganda shillings with free data for 1 whole year worth 86,500 shillings, making the effective price of the 4G phone 163,500 shillings only. Airtel, the smartphone network.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda.
Good morning once again. Thank you so much for keeping it here with us on UBC TV. Welcome to Good Morning Uganda Agenda. Now in this segment, we usually have a guest in studios and you're able to be part of the topic of discussion by simply going on our various social media platforms and sending us a message. You can also send us the traditional way, that is an SMS on our number that will be coming on your screen and you'll be part of the topic of discussion. Once again, I'm Robert Kirabo Nyonyintono. Now today we are going to be handling a very interesting topic, and that is the Succession Amendment Act of 2001. This was passed by Parliament in February, and on the 10th of last month, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, assented to it, now being a law. This is what guides how the property of the deceased will be shared, more so when a person dies without leaving a will or making a will. Now, joining me on set to discuss this is a lawyer, and that is Susan Baruka from FIDA Uganda. She happens to be the legal advisor, strategic litigation. Now, when you talk about FIDA Uganda, in many men's ears, those who were there maybe a decade back would take off, because this was one of the organizations that was fighting for the rights of women that really made headlines. Susan, you're most welcome.
Thank you, Robert.
What happened? We no longer fear you like we did a few years back. To any man you mentioned, Finda, they would take off. You know what happened? What went wrong?
We actually still a force to be reckoned with.
Sure.
Yes. Ask those who have experienced us. Maybe they are just not coming out to share their experience.
Sure.
Yes.
Some years back we talked about the entire village quakes because now they knew that justice would be delivered. Otherwise, how have you been?
I've been okay. Yes, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, to begin with, as a lawyer, help us understand what a will is, because for this law, if someone leaves a will, then it doesn't apply. If someone doesn't leave a will, that is when the law comes into existence. What is this thing that many men fear to write, many people fear to make, yet is very important?
So a will is essentially that document that speaks to, as the word suggests, will. What is the will of the person who has passed on? How do they want their property and their possessions that they have left behind to be dealt with? So essentially that's what a will is. And of course, there are, when you talk about people being afraid to make wills, of course, that comes with a superstitious misunderstanding that once you make a will, then you're going to die. But you see, making a will.
As you're going, you're sure you're going.
But you see, it's better that you actually make the will well beforehand and well ahead of time, and not when you're in such circumstances, you know, because then that leaves room for it to be challenged on different grounds. Someone can come up and say, no, since you are dying, you are not even in your right mind, you know, because it has to be something, a document that is written by an adult of sound mind, and they have made it with, you know, on their own volition, without any coercion or being forced into writing anything. So it's better that you actually take your time to write a will and clearly indicate how you want each and every one of your possessions to be dealt with, you know. And for me, I would actually encourage people to just grow into that habit, in that even though you've not amassed a lot of wealth, you can even start by distributing some of your most prized clothes, for example, so that, because you have to keep updating the will
as you scrambling for your wardrobe.
You know,
your dead sons.
Yeah, so that it becomes something that is ingrained in you, that you know,
then where do I keep this? You know, also, who is the rightful steward for this? This seems funny, but to be honest, Susan, these are what cause problems. Someone dies, then they ask, who has the let's will? Now this one comes, the other comes, they're contradicting. One tells you the wife landed on the will and it caused his death, because she looked through and she's like, where am I here and my children?
Yeah. So it is best advised that you actually secure a will with person of high repute that you actually trust, especially a person who has the obligation to keep whatever information they have that they get from you confidential. For starters, you can keep your will with a lawyer, an advocate. You can keep a will with them. Then you can also keep a will with the bank. That is also something that you can actually deposit in the bank.
Okay.
And of course, usually people also keep, like, you can keep your will with a lawyer, but then you also keep a copy with a trusted individual that is, you know, you're confident, someone who has no benefit whatsoever. Who has no benefit whatsoever in the distribution of your property.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, going back to the law that is now in place after His Excellency assenting to it, there is also, now that you are done with the will, let's understand, who does this law refer to begin with defining a couple or spouse? Who are these people? Because you have many people who think they are covered in this law as spouses, yet they are not.
Thank you, Robert, for that very pertinent question. So when we talk about who is covered under the Succession Act, who is referred to as a spouse, like you say, they're talking about someone who is a husband or wife within the meaning of the laws relating to marriage in Uganda, particularly recognized marriages in Uganda. So this will include people who undergo Christian marriages.
That is the church marriage?
Yes, the church marriage. People who undergo Muslim marriages. People who undergo Hindu marriages. People who undergo customary marriages, and people who undergo civil marriages. So those are the 5 types of recognized marriages in Uganda. However, it also recognizes marriages which may have been contracted outside of Uganda, but only for as long as those marriages are also considered or recognized within Uganda. So you and your wife may have, for instance, conducted a civil marriage in the UK. That marriage is not done in Uganda, but it's recognized as a valid marriage within the Ugandan laws. So still the law will apply to you. So those are the 5 types of marriages that are recognized within our Ugandan law. And when they talk about spouse, they're talking about a husband or a wife under those under any of those types of marriages.
So my sisters, my brothers that are cohabiting, well, this law leaves you out. Wait for your time. We have no law that protects you as of now. Do all it takes to get married so that you're referred to as spouses under the laws of this country. Now let's look at the content of the law. There are a number of clauses that are very interesting, but I'll begin with property sharing of spouses, where it is clear that in case one of the spouses dies, now I'm referring to the wife or husband, but for equality we use the word spouses. One dies, the other takes 20% of the assets. But still the law says in case one of them dies and they don't have a child, the other takes 50% of the wealth that has been left behind. Let's look at this, where it also still goes on regarding spouses, that in case a person dies and has one and more, or one and others, all of them share the 20%. This is where I find, in one way or the other, not fair.
So, Robert, you're not alone in that thinking. First of all, before we even talk about that scenario where there is more than one surviving spouse and they have to share that 20%, already there are a lot of schools of thought that say that even with lineal descendants and dependents, it should have ideally been that the spouse gets 50%, you know? Because, for example, if you're to draw a comparison with how property is ideally distributed at the point of divorce, it is 50-50. So a lot of people are actually pushing the argument that this is unfair because even in death there should be equality. That equality should still be exercised. It should still be 50-50 even when the other spouse has actually passed on. So there is already that particular angle of contention with that 20% rule. So now drawing back to the issue of where the 20% share now has to be distributed where there is more than one spouse. Of course, that is also very problematic.
Because in customary, it is okay. I can have my 4. In Islam, if you don't go to the Islamic way of doing things, I can have my 4 women. 20%, that means 5 plus this lady who has been the official taking, you know.
Yeah, so you're not alone really in that line of thought. And because we are looking at also the aspect of, does this law actually pay attention to the lived realities of, you know, people in Uganda? You know, a lot of people actually undergo customary marriages. So there is the justice in 5 or 3 women having to share, you know, a 20% share you know, and I was going to say 20 women, but it's possible actually in the customary.
So that means a 1-1.
And everyone gets 1% because it's not against the law in terms of, you know, the rules apply relating to customary marriages. So you're very right in terms of saying that there is a lot of injustice there when it comes to that 20% rule. And it's not just in relation to where, you know, there is more than one surviving spouse. Even where there is just one spouse, there are a lot of proponents for the argument that it should have been 50-50.
Okay, let's look at men now, knowing that they can't share. Previously, they weren't so much considered, but now a man knows that what we have amassed, women have worth. Women have worth. Sometimes we get together when even the lady of late, we are seeing so many women that are really empowered, and some young men are preferring to have good bodies, dress well, and attract these women that are really amassed wealth. So now they can get that 20%. What is your perception on this, given our culture? And as we know that sometimes it is believed that even some people may actually involve in criminality to benefit from the assets of someone.
So my perception on that, the fact that men can also now benefit from the property of their deceased spouses, I actually don't see it like that. I see it as the law actually moving with the time and understanding that women can also acquire property. Because one of the objectives of this Amendment Act, because it is a Succession Amendment Act, one of the objectives was to actually put certain clauses or certain sections of the Succession Act that we inherited from the colonial masters, which had been declared unconstitutional. Sometime back around 2007, the Constitutional Court actually passed a decision in a case that had been brought by Law and Advocacy for Women. That was the case that was challenging the constitutionality of some provisions in the Penal Code Act, which were criminalizing adultery. Then also, they also had another suit again challenging now these various provisions within the Succession Act. And under that Succession Act, Cap 162, which is being amended by this particular law, they only considered the estate of a male person. So the language was not even seeing women, you know. So it was considered that, well, what property is a woman going to be distributing? What property is she going to be leaving behind? And you know, it all comes from, it had that history of, you know, the colonial era, even pre-colonial era, that of the laws that we inherited from past centuries Britain, where women were actually not allowed to own property.
Yes.
Married women are not allowed to own property. So it was considered that, well, when she dies, she doesn't have anything to her name that is going to be distributed. So that's where all that, you know, these laws are intertwined in that way, in that they all play on that, they were crafted with that notion of a woman can't own property. In any case, the woman is property herself.
Now, this also brings me to another interesting clause where in case one of the spouses dies and they don't have a child together, the surviving spouse goes with 50%.
Yes.
Susan, this in one way or the other a bit confused me. Where the spouse, they have children, the lady is getting 20%. Where there is no child, which may be even a choice of the other, there is family planning, there is all this. Now, for the lady, she takes the 50. If it's the man, he takes the 50. And usually, what is there to show? Now, putting this, the rationale is something where I get confused.
So when you look at the provisions in the new act on that 50% distribution when there is no spouse, when there are no children, the other 50% practically goes to the customary heir and the dependents. So basically, this is the law that is catering to...
Actually, the dependents get 49%,
yes.
Then the heir gets the 1%.
Yes. So this is a law that is looking at dependents a lot. So when you say, when you ask who does this law actually apply to, so beyond applying to spouses, it also applies to spouses and children, it also applies to the dependents. So that is where the that concept is coming from.
So this woman has been, or this man has been a dependent.
Yes, so in other words, if you find, I mean, people cater to different people during their lifetime. We saw when our late Honorable Speaker passed on, we saw that he had a number of children he was paying school fees for, you know. Probably other relatives were also there that he was, you know, providing for, and their livelihood depended on him. So even you see that even in the previous law, this is actually an aspect that was catered for. So the fact that it is carried forward, well, someone would say perhaps it is a law that is alive to realities of our society, but someone else will say no. If we had no children, then everything that is left should go to the spouse, because they probably built these things together, they've amassed this wealth together through joint efforts. So someone would say, well, everything else should then be left to the spouse. But then again, that goes to show you that if you feel a certain way in terms of how the law is situated, in terms of how it dictates distribution of property, then it is important that you then make a will, so that you make a decision on how you want your property to be distributed.
Another interesting clause is when one dies and they have not shared the property, even after a particular time, this person could maybe have gone into another relationship and all that, they still stand to come and benefit from their share. Clarify on this from a legal perspective and legal mind.
So the law currently as is, it does not specifically speak to a person going into another relationship, but it says that if at least 6 months prior to the distribution of the property of the deceased, the surviving spouse had separated from the deceased, then they are not entitled to a share of the property. That is the legal position. However, there is room for the surviving spouse to actually challenge that provision and basically put in an application to court saying, giving their reasons why this particular exclusion clause or provision of the law should not apply to them, such that they can also now share in the property of the deceased as a surviving spouse. And the law lists a number of reasons that a person can advance to say or to argue why they should not be excluded, even though they had separated or they were living separately from the deceased. The first one is where it was the deceased themselves who actually, you know, walked away.
And today many men, to avoid problems, you walk away, you leave your marital home, you go find peace somewhere else.
So that particular scenario will also not exclude the surviving spouse if she was living separately from you. And then the other one is where the separation was actually the fault of the deceased. That is just another scenario where a surviving a spouse who was living separately will not be excluded.
So you prove to court that this man was beating me, I had to live for my life.
Yes.
So you get your 20%.
Yes.
If the court deems it fitting that yes, the deceased was guilty of causing this.
Yes. Yeah, and of course, you know, now there is the issues of evidence there, you know, that you have to present to make your case. So yes.
Now, away from the spouse, unless there's a clause you feel we've not tackled regarding the spouses in this, I want to move to the children, where this law looks at now, you see, with this every day we try discriminatory language. I want to avoid it. But we used to call them children outside wedlocks, sometimes illegitimate. Now all these are legit and share equally. Let's look into this as well.
Yes, so our law does not, this particular law actually recognizes children that are born outside of wedlock, because they are still considered to be descendants. In the law they call them linear descendants. They are direct descendants of the deceased. So, and especially within our context, the African context, we do not use that kind of language of illegitimate and legitimate children. So I think it's safe to say that all children, whether they were born in wedlock or outside wedlock, are well protected by this law. And they are, in fact, when you look at the descriptions that I used, a child still includes a child who is born outside of wedlock. And even further to that, it includes a child who was adopted, an adopted child. So the law is very inclusive when it comes to children. Yes.
Very interesting there. Now, men, you have to think twice. Because some of these clauses you see here, many are looking at mistakes that we do as men. One of them is having fairly not organized lifestyles, where you have kids here, kids there, kids there. Now it comes to sharing wealth. This one night stand is the child is benefiting, then that. So something to think about. But let's also look at the law giving all children equal rights as the heir. Of course, the heir gets 1% of the wealth in addition to his share as the children, the 75%. But the law goes further to say now they all again have equal rights.
Yes. So in terms of course, there is the customary heir, or what in our culture we refer to as the musika. So ideally, because sometimes the musika may be one of your children, they may not be one of your children. Although a lot of times people actually look at the firstborn child. You know, I was going to say firstborn son, but we are stepping away from that.
Now,
we have
Susan,
seen.
Susan, let's avoid opening a Pandora's box or a can of worms for certain things. For certain things, you know, one, I'm a very religious person, and I usually use the Bible as my constitution on some things. Then the second, I'm a very modern but African man, that I look at certain things. I don't go into the practice, but certain things. So let's not go there, because there we may lose our debate today.
I know. Although we have already seen it actually play out in real life when the late Professor Apollon Sibambi passed
Susan,
on.
please.
But
please.
let me carry on like you have.
Let's leave that direction. Let's leave that direction for another day. Could be a topic maybe one day.
Yes. So in terms of the equal rights, the law actually says, like you already pointed out with regard to the surviving spouses, that different classes of people, for example, if it's descendants, linear descendants, then they have to share equally within their, say, 75% share of the property. They have to share it equally. So that equality rule actually applies across the board for all the different categories of beneficiaries. If it is spouses, they will share equally within, within their 20%. If it is descendants, they will still share equally within their 75%. Of course, if one of the descendants happens to also be the heir, then they have that advantage that they will also they will also get their 1%. Yes.
Well, viewers, you can be part of the topic of discussion this morning as we look at the Succession Amendment Act 2021 that the President has sent it to. Please just go on our various social media platforms. You can send us a WhatsApp message on the number. It's coming up on your screen, our number, or you can use the traditional SMS still on the very number, and I can guarantee you I'll be responding to all your questions. And the guest I have in studios, who happens to be a lawyer, and she is the legal advisor, strategic litigation, FIDA Uganda. These people do so much work in terms of advocacy, promoting equality and justice, more so to the female flock. And many men will testify. If you're not very careful, if you receive summons or if you get them from FIDA Uganda, you must have a strong legal team to defeat their legal team. Well, the number is 0709 60 25 92. 0960 2592, and I'll be reading those messages regarding this new law. Now, let's also look at the term dependents, because at every time, dependents have a percentage of what they take regarding the deceased's properties. Who are dependents? Can my neighbor be a dependent because once in a while maybe I pay fees, or once in a while I give them food? You know, law requires clarity.
For sure.
Because that is what you people do to us. Interpret, then interpretation. No, you don't qualify. Who is a dependent as covered by the law?
So, a dependent is essentially someone whose livelihood has been dependent on the deceased at the time that the deceased was alive. So if the deceased had undertaken to pay for your education, it means your education is dependent on the deceased. If the deceased was the one providing you with shelter and you had nowhere else to go but for the shelter that was given to you by the deceased, you are a dependent. If the food you are eating on a daily basis was being availed to you by the deceased on a daily basis, then you are a dependent for all intents and purposes. Within that, basically depending on what it is the deceased was catering to during his lifetime for your livelihood.
Very interesting. I'm going to ask a funny but important question. Now, you see, the world has changed and there are new terms that have come up. A woman can have money as spouse, and they have their side chick. A man can have money and he has his side chick. Now, do side chicks qualify to be dependents? You find a man is paying rent, sending money for this upkeep of this little girl. The woman, she's in a marriage, but secretly, hey, has this. Don't laugh. This is reality. So, are these dependents? Do I need to come with proof that yes, I've been a dependent? Because they're secret dependents. There are those remain, but they could be a secret dependent.
So, the law does not know about secret dependents. If they fit within the description of who a dependent is, whether everyone else knew about them or not, they reserve the right to actually stand up for themselves and enforce their right to be provided for within the law, because that law actually says that 21% of the property of the deceased shall be reserved for providing for the dependents. So, whether you have your girlfriend on the side or your boyfriend on the side, and you are the one who was basically providing for their every need, you know, and they can prove it, then they will have to be made provisions for from your estate when you pass on.
I know Banga because they must be most at such a time. Well, messages are coming in, and I want to thank you so much wherever is sending in a message. Let me begin with Ben from Kotido. He says, "Hi Robert and Susan, is it true a will is only binding if drafted by a practicing lawyer?" That is Ben from Kotido. And then we have another one. "I am married, customary, but my spouse is not comfortable signing the paper for us to acquire marriage certificate. Does the law consider me as a spouse? I'm the only wife." Assumably, you never know. It says I'm the only wife. Okay. Then another one here, very interesting. Still, thanks for the show. Can you clarify on whether the law distinguishes between children who are adults and living independent lives, and children who are still minors and living with stroke dependent on the deceased? You've got that question clearly?
Yes.
Okay. Well, keep the questions coming in, and please don't send us a voice note. My dear, how can you send please type this message. Wonders never cease to end. My brother. Okay, let's first have the response to those.
Yes, so
in response to Ben's question about whether or not a will is only valid if it is drafted by a lawyer, that is absolutely not true. A will be valid as long as it is clear in the way it is written and it is witnessed by 2 people. So each of your witnesses should clearly indicate their names and addresses on every page of that will. So that is like kind of the new guidance in terms of formalities. So it is not true that only a lawyer should draft your will. No, you yourself can actually sit and you make your will, and as long as it is witnessed by you have 2 witnesses who have put their signatures on it, then it's fine. It's valid. And then somebody asked about the customary marriage certificate. So we have the Customary Marriages and Registration Act, which basically gives guidance in terms of formalities for customary marriages. And fortunately for us in Uganda, I'm saying fortunately because it is not the case with our neighbors, for example in Kenya. For us in Uganda, if you have not registered your customary marriage, so you know there is that certificate that we get, you know, the cultural, from the cultural institution, that one that people hold up at the ceremony itself, that one is not the certificate that the law envisages. You have to go to the marriage registry, which is usually, I think, at the district headquarters. And then you get a certificate from the registrar of marriages, a certificate of your customary marriage. However, like I was saying, fortunately for us in Uganda, you not having a marriage certificate, a customary marriage certificate, does not mean that your customary marriage is not valid. So you will still be considered a spouse within the law.
Okay.
Yes.
That is very interesting. Then the dependent issue.
Yes. So in terms of, what was it? Oh, yes, in terms of dependence, whether it distinguishes between children who are...
It says, thanks for the show. Can you clarify on whether the law distinguishes between children who are adults and living independent lives and children who are still minors and living or depending on the deceased?
Okay, so in terms of dependence, the law provides for, of course, we'll look at children who are below 18 years. And actually, when I was talking about that 21%, that 21% also talks about catering for the education of descendants, which includes children, of course, who are below 18. Makes provision for providing for the education. And then when you talk about those who are above 18 years, it looks at people who are below 25, but they were still depending on the deceased at the time of the deceased's death. So that will include also children who are above 18, but they were entirely dependent on the deceased. And they only look at, of course, when they looking at it from the context of dependence, they will only look at those above 18, but below 25, and when they are not married, yes.
Okay. Well, Susan, in the interest of time, I must say there are so many questions, but there is one that I feel we should address because I don't want our viewers to have this confusion. Here one says, hello, sir, I'm from March, India. My question is, has the fine for somebody committing adultery inside also been looked into? Because I heard it's a very small fine. Well, I think you're confusing. That is the Sexual Offences Bill, which the President deferred, and the Succession Amendment Act. So these are two different things, but good, I have counsel here. Finally, someone says, good morning, Uganda. Thanks for the show. Can you please hint a little on compulsory succession, testamentary succession, and incest succession? Akena Walter from Kitgum. I don't know if Susan, you get what he's referring to, because I don't. Then, well, I'm Fred from Kagadi. So many messages, but many people are grateful. However, one asks, why was the customary hair given only 1%? Someone asks, only 1%. Can you respond to that briefly?
Well, I would say probably because it is a ceremonial role. That is my understanding, but of course it will require, because that's how it was even in the act that we the act that is being amended, which we inherited basically. So I'm not sure where I cannot say on good authority why the customary era was only given 1%, but I reckon it could be because it is a ceremonial role that should not gravely affect how other people who will probably be more dependent on the deceased. So in terms of the person who asked about adultery, adultery was an offense in the Penal Code Act. Of course, when you open the Penal Code Act now, you will still find it there, but it was declared unconstitutional. Actually, still from the same judgment that declared a number of provisions under the Succession Act that we are now amending unconstitutional for being discriminatory on the basis of sex and gender. So adultery is no longer an offense.
Well, I want to thank you so much. Susan Baluka, who happens to be legal advisor, strategic litigation, FIDA Uganda. Thank you so much for your time. I believe many Ugandans have gotten a hint on this. Of course, many questions, but I want to thank you so much. Whoever has sent us a WhatsApp message, an SMS, thank you so very much. Let me have your final remarks in just less than a minute.
I would like to say that the Succession Amendment Act is a very welcome document to a larger extent, even though there may still be some reservations, especially for those of us who are advocating for gender equality and gender justice. There are quite a number of provisions that are kind of taking us forward. We may not have spoken about all of them because of limited time, but there are quite many, and I would encourage all of us who are really interested for our own good, because we never think that something is important until we find ourselves in a situation that requires us to be in the know, and know our rights. So I would encourage each and every one of us to seek out this law. I'm sure it is available on the internet, so we can use that data to educate ourselves on some of these developments, especially on an issue such as succession, because we are all prone to being affected by it. And I think just a vote of thanks to each and everyone who has fought different people, especially women, in different women's rights movements and different women's rights advocates who have pushed to have this law enacted into law. And for of course we still have a number of reservations, but we shall keep pushing.
Well, I want to thank you so much. Susan, thank you, our viewers. Ensure you make a will, because this law only comes in place when you didn't make a will. So to avoid such, or if you feel you're discomforted by some of the clauses, make a will. Have a lovely day. God bless you.
An 11-year-old local lad joined our academy and began his career with West Ham United. He was born in Canning Town. Mark went on to progress through the youth ranks before making...
Live from UBC